Okay, so yesterday we talked about the firstborn animal from cattle, sheep, or goats. That and this also happens to be true of donkeys. The firstborn animal is to be dedicated as a bechor. The firstborn cattle, sheep, and goats are given to a Kohen. They're offered as an offering and then eaten. The firstborn donkey is there's two options. One option is that it's switched for a sheep, and then the sheep is brought as an offering. Or the other option is that it is slaughtered, but it is not brought as an offering. It's not considered a tahor animal as a species, and therefore can't be brought as a sacrifice. And I mentioned to you just that connection, although when it comes to these firstborn animals, they are sanctified the minute they're born. We're still supposed to declare them sanctified. That's a mitzvah by Bechor, and I was just suggesting the similarity to Kiddush on Friday night, that although Shabbos is naturally sanctified, we're asked to be Mekadesh it, to sanctify it. So they share that. All right. The next mitzvah is what we call Pidyon Ben. And that is that he, capital H, God, commanded us to redeem the firstborn man, that we should give the money to the priest. And that is his saying, you shall give me your firstborn sons. And he explained to us how this giving should be. And it is that we redeem him from the priest. And it is as if the priest already acquired him, and we purchase him from him for 5 selah, and that is his saying, but surely redeem the firstborn man. This commandment is the commandment of redeeming son, what we call Pidyon Ben. A woman is not obligated in it. Indeed, it is one of the commandments of the son that is upon the father, as is explained in Kiddushin. In other words, up until a certain age, the father is responsible to take care of it, but at a certain point, the son takes over that responsibility. If he never had a Pidyon Ben, it's up to the son to eventually make sure that they have a Pidyon Ben. And all of the laws of the commandment have already been explained in Bechorot. However, Levites are not obligated in it. See Mishpatim, Mishnah Torah firstlings. So Levites and Kohanim are not obliged. In other words, if their firstborn son, their firstborn child is a male, they do not do Pidyon Ben. The reasoning given in the Torah for Pidyon Ben is that the Levites as a tribe are taking over, they're switching out the firstborn. The firstborn became specially sanctified at Makas Bechoros, at the plague of the firstborn. God protects the firstborn of Israel by specially sanctifying them, and when he does that, the firstborn are not subject to the destroyer. The destroyer is only going to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. As a result, the firstborn of Israel were designated for service of God. Service of God would be expressed in the tabernacle and the Beit HaMikdash. Eventually, the work of the Leviim was to be the guards there were 24 guard spots around the Beit HaMikdash. 21 of them were manned by Leviim, 3 by Kohanim. They were also the symphony and the choir of the Beit HaMikdash. So they served in the Beit HaMikdash. During the time of the Mishkan, they were also responsible for the packing and transporting of the Mishkan and its vessels. So they had that extra responsibility. But all of this, the Leviim got because they are replacing the firstborn. So the firstborn would have done all that. They were supposed to do all that because of their special kedusha that they got when God spared them from Makas Bechoros. But they were involved with the golden calf, and because they were involved with the golden calf, they lost their right to it, or at least the tribe of Levi in its entirety was not involved in the golden calf. That set them apart and made them specially suited to do the service that was designated for the firstborn. So the firstborn are switched out. They have sanctity, but the sanctity is going to be redeemed. And the way the sanctity is redeemed is on money. So the way it works is the Kohanim are, for some reason, in charge. They represent the body in charge of the sanctity of the firstborn. The parent pays money, 5 shekel, and that money is said to now redeem the sanctity of the firstborn. The firstborn no longer has the sanctity and no longer is set aside to serve in the Beit HaMikdash. The Rambam also added the notion that in general, the Levi would be the teachers of Israel because they have this special opportunity for service of God. They're freed from the yoke of labor. So they have an opportunity to study and to become scholars. And so on top of their other responsibilities, they would also be the teachers of Torah, etc., amongst the Jewish people. So again, all of that would have been in the job description of the firstborn, but the Levim are going to replace them. So this is the process of removing the special sanctity from the firstborn. And here is that part I was telling you about the donkey. That is that he commanded us, this is Mitzvah 82, that we should redeem the firstborn donkey, specifically with a sheep, and it should not be redeemed with anything else. One should give the sheep to a priest, and that is his maybe a blessed saying, but the first thing of donkey you should redeem with a sheep. The regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Bechorot, and the Levites are not obligated in this commandment. So that's called Pidyon Peter Chamor. Now, he commanded us to behead the firstborn donkey if we do not redeem it. And that is, may he be blessed, saying, if you do not redeem it, you must behead it. Now, this is, when it says behead it, you're using something more like an axe, and you're chopping it from behind. The only beheading I've ever seen, well, I've seen a few. I saw the movie Papillon had a beheading in it that used a guillotine. And that was a very memorable scene, which is hard to get out of my brain since seeing that movie. And then in the TV series, the BBC TV series Wolf Hall, which is one of my all-time favorite TV series. It's just, I think, 6 episodes or 8 episodes. So they have the beheading of Anne Boleyn, and there the executioner explained that as long as she doesn't move, she won't feel it. It'll happen so smooth, and her head will just come off. So I'm assuming it's something like that with the donkey, because obviously we recognize that you're not supposed to cause undue pain. So it would have to be, this is not shchita, this is from behind, not from in front. So it's not shchita, but you would imagine it's still able to be done in a way that does not cause the animal excess pain. The regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Tractate Bechoros. The questioner may challenge and say, why do you count its redemption and its beheading as two commandments? Why don't you count them as one commandment? Such that is beheading be from the laws of the commandments, like you explained in the seventh principle. In other words, either redeem it or behead it. Those are your two options, and they should all be counted as one mitzvah. Behold, God knows that the analogy requires this. Were it not that we found with our rabbi's language that indicates there are two commandments. Now, as the Rambam is saying, he on his own would have assumed it's just one commandment. It's just one mitzvah. But you see in the Gemara that they talk about it as two mitzvahs. So he is bowing to the Gemara and therefore counting it as two mitzvahs. And that is, they're saying the commandment of redemption precedes the commandment of beheading. The commandment of levirate marriage precedes the commandment of chalitza. Just like a levirate wife is suited for either levirate marriage or chalitza, and a levirate marriage is one commandment and chalitza is another commandment. In other words, really, this argument that you have two options, you're at a certain point and you have two, you either do this or do that. So he's saying logically that should just be considered one mitzvah that can either be done this way or that way. But you see that the language in the Gemara is not that way. The language of the Gemara is that it is two separate mitzvahs, just like levirate marriage and chalitza are two separate marriages, yibum and chalitza. So too is a firstborn donkey suited either for redemption or beheading, and each of them is a commandment, as we have said. Okay, so now we are on to this, mitzvah 83. That is that he commanded us to bring all the sacrifices that are incumbent upon one during the first holiday of the three pilgrim holidays that we encounter, such that none of the three pilgrim holidays pass without each of us sacrificing any sacrifice that he is obligated. What is he talking about? What he means is, if something happened and I decided that I need to bring a korban, it could be I need to bring a sin offering. It could be I need to bring one of the other offerings. I'm on Nazir and I need to bring the offerings connected to Nazir, or a woman after she gave birth, or a Zav or a Zava. They all have sacrifices they have to bring. Then there are also this voluntary sacrifices that somebody committed themselves to. Let's say something happened, they went on a long voyage and they returned safely, so they want to bring a Thanksgiving offering, or maybe just something else nice happened and they want to bring a peace offering. So once you are committed to bringing an offering, the time frame is up into and including the next festival. So if I found myself obliged to bring sacrifices in December, so the next the pilgrimage festival is Pesach. So by Pesach, I'm supposed to, or throughout Pesach, I still have an option, but sometime before the end of Pesach, I'm supposed to bring all the offerings that I was supposed to bring. This would also include the tithe offerings that we talked about before. This would include the Bechor offerings. Any offerings that I'm obliged to bring, I should bring by the next pilgrimage festival. What happens if I incurred the need for the korban at the end of April? So then the next pilgrimage festival would be Shavuos. And let's say I incurred the need to bring a korban in the beginning of June or July. The next pilgrimage festival would be Sukkot. So by then I'm expected to bring it. If I don't bring it by then I'm considered late with it. And that is his maybe exalted saying, and there shall you come and there shall you bring. The content of this command is that it is saying that when you come there, and that is on each of the holidays of three pilgrim holidays, you're obligated to bring every sacrifice incumbent upon you. The language of the Sifrei is, and there shall you come and there shall you bring. Why is that stated? To make them obligatory on the first holiday that he encounters. And there it says he is not in transgression of you shall not delay. So because it says, Bal ta'acha, you shall not delay in fulfilling your vows and your sacrificial responsibilities. What's called delay? How late can you be and not be in violation of delaying? So as long as you bring it by the next pilgrimage festival, you're good. Until all three of the pilgrimage holidays of the whole year have passed him by. This means to say that he has transgressed a negative commandment only after 3 pilgrim holidays have passed him by, and he has not brought them. However, when one holiday passes him by, he's already violated a positive commandment. So the positive commandment to make sure you bring those things in a timely fashion is already transgressed if one pilgrimage festival passed and you did not bring it. And in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Meir says, once even one holiday has passed, one transgresses, you shall not delay. And it is said there, and Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir, what is his reason? It is written, and there shall you come, and there shall you bring. But the rabbi's reason, this verse only comes to indicate a positive commandment. So the next holiday, if you didn't bring it, you're in violation of a positive commandment. They want you to bring it in a timely fashion. Behold, it has already been explained that his saying, and there shall you come and there shall you bring, is a positive commandment. And that is that he bring all that he is obligated from God's law and dispose of them on each and every holiday. And where it is any of the types of sacrifices, monies, appraisals, consecrations, gleanings, forgotten sheaves, or other protests, the dispensation of one's obligation with any of these on the first holiday that he encounters is a positive commandment, as is explained in the Gemara, Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so when you incur a responsibility to bring a korban, you're supposed to bring it at the first available pilgrimage festival. Once you've gone through the series, then you've also transgressed a negative commandment of do not delay. Next mitzvah, that is that he commanded us to offer all the sacrifices in the temple. And that is, may he be exalted, saying, there shall you bring up your burnt offerings, and there you shall do. And because they wanted to confirm the prohibition not to offer any of the sacrifices outside of it, they took the proof from his saying, lest you bring up your burnt offerings in any place. And they said in the Sifrei, the halachic midrash, this tells me only of burnt offerings. From where do we know the same is true for other offerings? Hence we learn to say, and there shall you do that I commanded you. But I still would say that only burnt offerings are subject to a positive and a negative commandment. From where do we know the same is true for other offerings? Hence we learn to say, and there shall you do, as we will explain in its place when we speak about the negative commandments. The content of their saying burnt offerings are subject to a positive commandment. And a negative commandment is that one who offers a burnt offering outside would be transgressing a positive and negative commandment. Indeed, the negative commandment is his saying, lest you bring up your burnt offerings. And for the positive commandment, it is his saying, there you shall bring up. Other offerings would only be a positive commandment, is meaning to say, is saying, and there shall you do by itself. But it is explained that even for other offerings, one also transgresses a negative commandment along with a positive commandment. It's already been explained at the end of Zevachim, which is a tractate about sacrifices, that all offerings that are sacrificed outside are a violation of a positive and a negative commandment. And one is liable excision on that account. That's karate. So it's a very serious prohibition. Behold, it has been made clear to you from all that I said that his saying, and there shall you do, is a full-fledged positive commandment. So a lot of this is just to keep his accounting so that we are certain that it deserves to be counted amongst the positive commandments, that there is also going to be a negative commandment. So the positive commandment is that when you bring a korban, it needs to be in the Beit HaMikdash. Before the Beit HaMikdash, when there was a Mishkan, it was brought in the tabernacle. Before the tabernacle, offerings were just brought. They could be brought on altars that an individual made or a community made. There were also times after the Mishkan is destroyed at Shiloh, there's a period of a couple decades before there is the Beit HaMikdash. And so in that in-between period, there would also be a permit to make an altar and bring offerings on an altar that was not in the Mishkan or clearly not in the Beit HaMikdash. These are called bamot, a bama. Typically, they were a raised, some kind of raised platform or a stone, a big stone. They were often on hilltops, but not only on hilltops. In the Book of Kings, it talks about how even the good kings, the kings who are praised for following God's ways, in most of their cases, there still were bamot, people in parts of the country where they weren't right next to Israel, right next to Jerusalem. There were still people bringing offerings to private altars. There are. Show you. There's been archaeological digs where they. Oh no! Start. Okay, sorry. Bama. That's funny. The open air altar shrine called a bama is known through, this is from Biblical Archaeological Magazine, bibliarchaeological.org. The open air altar shrine called a bama is known through several books of biblical canon, but none more than the Book of Kings, where they play a prominent role in assessing the performance of a king. Often referred to as high places in translations of the Bible, bamot were worship sites that usually contained an altar. A general understanding about the bama and how it functioned can be gained by using evidence from the biblical text as well as archaeology. The term bama can mean back, hill, height, ridge, or cultic high place. In biblical texts, it is used to mean the back of one's enemies, heights, back of clouds, waves of the sea. Because of this, the eminent scholar Roland Deval said, the idea which the word expresses, therefore, is something which stands out in relief from its background, but the idea of a mountain or hill is not contained in the word itself. This could explain why this word is used, even though some of the shrines were not located on hills. The Ugaritic and Akkadian cognate usually means an animal's back or trunk. The Akkadian can also mean land that is elevated. In the text of the Bible, they can be found on hills, etc. Now, even though some scholars translate bama as high place or hill shrines, there is reason to believe that many of the shrines were actually located in urban centers, since they were often found on hills, at city gates, and in valleys. Says the essential feature of the bama was therefore not its location or height, though it usually consisted of at least a human form platform, sometimes with an association of a building or buildings. So just here is a bama from Beersheba, which is an altar. But I've seen some images where it looks like a tomb building, or like a building. Let's see here. images. Sometimes the way they tell the difference between a bama and a Gentile slaughter place is by the bones. Like in the Jewish ones, they would only be like sheep or goats or something like that. In the Gentile ones, they'll find like dog bones, etc. Let's just see. It's a fort. It's very serious business, this archaeological stuff. This is a response to your article in March issue about the alleged bama at Beersheba. Yigal Yadin finds a bama at Beersheba. There's not one scrap of evidence, biblical or archaeological, in favor of Yadin's theory. The biblical passage Yadin relies on speaks of a bama in Jerusalem and says that Josiah broke down the high places of the gates. This verse indicates that Yoshio destroyed the buildings as well as the altars. But building 430, the building at Beersheba to the left of the city gate, was not destroyed until the Assyrian city was burned by an enemy. Meanwhile, the altar has already been dismantled. During the last season of excavation, additional stones of altars were found outside the gate, buried in a newly laid rampart of Stratum 2. House 430 was built during the period of Stratum 2. The house was built after the altar was dismantled. All right, so you see this issue of bamas, very serious business, taken very seriously by archaeologists. Anyways, if you do not sacrifice in the Beit HaMikdash, you're sacrificing on a bama, and this was a problem, like a rampant problem during the times of the kings, because there was a lot of pressure for some reason to sacrifice on bamas. And so even though a lot of the kings are rated as good, it will say, but they didn't get rid of the bamas. At one point, Chizkiyahu does. At one point, Yoshiyahu does. But otherwise, it was a rampant problem. I have heard people compare the shtibels of today to bamas. There are communities that feel that everybody davening together is important for unity and community identity, and the notion that people would separate themselves and pray in somebody's house was they compare it to the bama and the prohibition of bringing a sacrifice outside of the Beit HaMikdash. Very dramatic. By the way, this is how he chooses to refer to the Beit HaMikdash, the chosen house, Beit HaBechira, the house of choosing. Temple, chosen house. That is, he commanded us to bring any sin offering, burnt offering, guilt offering, and peace offering, which we're obligated to the temple, even when they are outside the land of Israel. Meaning to say, we become obligated for them outside the land. Even though we're obligated outside the land, we are surely obligated to bring them to the temple. And that is a saying, but your consecrated things as you may have. The language of this Sifri, your consecrated things, rather it must be speaking of consecrations outside the land of Israel, shall you bear and you shall come. This teaches that he must care for what he brought until he brings it to the temple. And they decided that there's actually, regarding the sin offerings, burnt offerings, guilt offerings, and peace offerings, that each person is obligated. So not only do you have to bring your offerings to the Beit HaMikdash in Israel when you're in Israel, but you have to bring those offerings in Israel, even if you're outside of Israel. So if somebody would incur a particular offering outside the land of Israel, which any woman who gives birth outside the land of Israel is incurring a need for, you could ask yourself, let's say I don't sin. Let's say I don't travel. Let's say I don't do these kinds of things. It's possible I could get by without having to bring an offering to the Beit HaMikdash. Even the Korban Pesach, the Pesach offering, I only have to bring if I am close enough to be considered obligated, close enough to the Beit HaMikdash. If I'm far from the Beit HaMikdash, I'm not obligated to make that pilgrimage festival. It's a nice thing to do, but I'm not obligated to. So you could think that you would get by without having to bring a offering. And let's say I don't become a Metzora, I don't become a Zav, but I don't become a Nazir, but a woman who gives birth has to bring offerings. So that would mean wherever she lives, somehow she has to bring offerings to Eretz Yisrael, which is something to think about. It'd be interesting to see a treatment of everyday life in a particular town, let's say in Bavel, and how they would get their offerings to Israel, if they actually themselves went, or did they send them? It would be a big deal if you lived far away. Oh yeah, so there's this one other thing, and with this, two Jewish temples in Egypt. This is from something called the Sfarim blog. Rabbi Reuven Chaim Klein is the author of the newly released work, God versus Gods, Judaism in the Age of Idolatry. His book follows the narrative of Tanakh and focuses on stories concerning Avodah Zarah using both traditional and academic sources. It also includes an encyclopedia of all the different types of idolatry mentioned in the Bible. Rabbi Klein studied for over a decade at the premier institute of the Haredi world, including Lakewood and Mir. He authored many articles both in English and Hebrew, and his first book, Lashon HaKodesh, History, Holiness in Hebrew, became an instant classic. His weekly articles on synonyms in the Hebrew language are published in the Jewish Press and Ornet. Rabbi Klein lives with his family in Beitar Illit, Israel, and can be reached by email to rabbiklein@gmail. In this article, we'll discuss two different temples which the Jews built in Egypt, the temple at Elephantine and Chonio's temple. After providing the reader with the historical background of both temples, we will analyze the nature of the worship which took place there, as well as their possible halachic legitimacy. So we're going to look at this a little bit tomorrow. In other words, let's say you lived outside of Israel. So the Rambam is saying you have to go to the temple in Jerusalem and bring your korbanos to the temple in Jerusalem. You might ask, what were your options? So here are some interesting options. It's really fascinating that these existed at all. They are discussed in the Gemara and in other places. And so we're going to look at them. One is called the Elephantine Temple, and the other one is Chonio's Temple. And we'll see what they have to say about it. I look forward to studying with you guys tomorrow. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to study with you guys today.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Be well.